Hello, I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about content strategy. Anybody here a content strategist? Anybody? Anybody ever work with a content strategist? Yay, all my friends. Anyone know a content strategist? Oh, yay, my acquaintances. Okay, so let me start with a little bit of oversight for you here. Content, when we go into this conversation, content doesn't just mean copy, okay? It means images, it means video, it means audio, it means podcasts, it means digital content, it means signage, it can mean anything, right? It's an omni-channel experience, okay? So as I talk about this, a lot of us come to it and we still, those of us of a certain age, we still think of it as print, but obviously it's a lot more, okay? Content is queen, okay? The latest thing, if you're out there, people are saying content is king. Thought I'd give it a little extra time. It's actually queen, if you recognize Helen Mirren. And why do we say that? We say that because historically, when we think about what we're doing here, it's all about the content, right? We're designing things, we're creating interfaces, we're creating applications, we're doing back end, all to get something to other people to make them do something, right? So content is really, it's information given shape, given sound, given vision, right? It's the stuff. So it's always been what we use to communicate. And we also know it's what people crave, right? People want information, they want to make sense, they want to communicate. We know this as well, right? And we know that whether we're in business, or we're in a nonprofit, or we're in education, or we're an entertainer. It doesn't matter what you're doing, right? It's what we use to prompt action in people. I want you to give me your money. I want you to laugh at my jokes. Doesn't matter, right? It's all we have. Okay. The complexity of content right now is growing by the day, right? When we think about ages ago, we had cave paintings, and then we got the printing press, and we got illuminated manuscripts and newspapers and journals, and the internet. And now, even on the internet, right, we've got user-generated content, okay? Whether that's people's Facebook posts or their comments, which require curation or something. We've got everything social, right? Including your tweets, etc. We've got all kinds of new channels coming up, right? You know, we didn't have Netflix. We didn't have, every day somebody's giving their content out in a different way with a different business model behind it and different intentions behind it, okay? We've got cross channels, okay? And what I mean by that is anyone who comes from technical writing, any of the developers, I think our last presentation and our wearable presentation especially showed that you need to be saying the same thing across channels, right? You can't have one message one way or one message another way. Anyone who's called help for a large company like Cabletown knows that the person on the phone isn't telling you the same thing as the person in the office, isn't telling you the same thing as this message on your modem, and you have trouble, right? So help, right? What are we going to do with all this? It requires a strategy. Okay, and that's where content strategy comes in. First of all, since a lot of you don't know any content strategists, I want to say that you're going to see a lot of overlap between the practices and the goals that I'm going to tell you about and some of the stuff that you all do. It's a kind of a hybrid discipline at this point. We're only starting to see content strategy programs, like University of Michigan now has we make syllabi for content strategy classes. But mostly we come from a lot of different disciplines, and some of us lean more toward you know, sort of outward-facing commercial e-commerce stuff. Some people come from tech comm, right? Some people come from programming, developing, right? Content management systems. So we do the whole range. So this doesn't mean to be a turf war. Just, in fact, notice when you see things that cross disciplines. Okay, so basic definition has evolved, I would say, in the past 5 years. We seem to have come out as a discipline, decided we're called content strategists, and decided that more or less, this is what we do, okay? Content strategy is planning to use content to meet audience needs and advance business goals. Okay, now if you're a nonprofit, I've spent most of my career in nonprofits until very recently. So your business goal could be very charitable, doesn't have to be making money, could be a school, whatever. It's taking this stuff and getting it out to people so they'll do what you want them to do. Okay, that's got two faces. This is another place where people tend to think of it one way or the other, but we really have both, right? You've got external. That's the one most people think of first, right? Is their website good? Number one question, right? Is their content good in their advertisements, across channels, in the bus stations, what have you? But there's also my favorite, which is internal content strategy. And that is where I think it gets really interesting. And that's when we talk a little bit more toward UX in some ways. We're talking about how do we produce, maintain, circulate, distribute consistent, clear, helpful content in-house, right? I have a personal affinity toward all the people who have to make content, and they're told to make silly content and do silly things with it. And content strategy is going to liberate them. When we work content strategy into a project, we need to collaborate, okay? It's never just going to be something that you hand off to a strategist, because if you do, you're not going to get what you need out of them, okay? Starting with sales, through discovery, analytics, design, delivery, sustainability, right, that afterlife. You need to have all the professionals who work in all these disciplines collaborating with the content strategist. I want to throw in here a point I forgot to make, which is future looking. More and more content is personalized, it's localized. We're getting more and more and more data, okay? So this means great things for business because it means we can come back and see how your changes worked and tweak accordingly, right? So as we do more personalization and more localization, which is the trend, especially in e-commerce, the stakes just get higher and higher, and there's more and more to do. Because this is a UX-focused piece, I focused on how content strategy and UX can work together. I have a long spiel that starts with sales and ends, with the end of the world, but today we're going to focus on UX, okay? Remember that in discovery, when we do that research, however we decide to define the problem is really going to push us toward a solution. If you don't have someone in there thinking about the content, how's it going to get made? Is it sustainable? Are they going to get this information? When you come to doing wireframes or designing or deciding what the functionality is, it's unlikely you're going to get people to think of it as a content kind of issue. Okay, so one thing that I have learned through experience is you need the content strategist there at the beginning to understand how the content needs and the process is going to play out for the design that you're going to create, for the CMS that you're going to build, for the metadata that you're going to gather, for how much you can localize, for what kind of images you're going to need, all of that stuff. Okay, so somebody might recognize what that is. Anyone? That's David Byrne. Okay. One of the first things that I like as a content strategist to do when we go into discovery, right? We've signed a deal, we're going to go in there, we're going to make something better. And we'll say a website just because it's the easiest thing to think about, right? You would think that we want to look at the content itself. And that's true. But even before that, my first question is, how did we get here? And I'm sure all of you, when you look at things that you have to redesign, you have to ask yourself this, often while banging your head against a table, right? How did we get here? So during discovery, I'm going to look at your content and assess it, but I'm also going to want to shadow you. If UX people are doing research, I'm going to say, hey, if we don't have budget for me to come along, can you make sure you look for these 3 or 4 things? Can you make sure you ask this question? Can you give me back what you find out? Right? Because I want to know, if I don't know how they created this mess, whatever I give them, they're just going to mess it up again, right? We don't need that. And guess who looks bad? Never them, right? Always the designers and developers. Okay, just a really quick, you're probably saying, well, what does this mean, right? So I wanted to just at least give you a hit list here of some of the kinds of stuff that we actually do. Okay, so we will be involved in person or through our colleagues who are doing research. Again, budget, time. We have to find ways to work together to really make this work. We'll be involved in gathering requirements. We'll be involved in reviewing analytics, which becomes exponentially more important every week. Now, I'm not an analytics person, so you can bet that whenever I start a project, the first thing I do is figure out who the analytics person is, what kind of donuts they like, whether they're a cat person or a dog person, and I make friends with them because I need them. I need them to give me numbers and I need them to tell me what it means. A generation from now, I hope that content strategists get a little more educated in that kind of thing, but in the meantime, there's too much to know, right? So both internally in my company, if we've put in an analyst on a project, and also at our partner company, I'm all smiles. Make friends and get this information. Because websites have a lot of content. And if I can get analytics and just prove off the top, you don't need half your content, which is true for virtually every website ever, then that's a whole battle I don't have to fight. It's a whole lot of coding people don't have to do. It's a whole lot of migration people don't have to figure out. It's a whole lot of functionality that maybe you don't have to worry about. We're going to go on contextual inquiries. We're going to do stakeholder interviews. Again, as time and budget permit, we participate to the extent that we can in person. It always helps in person, as you know. I'm going to find out about the technology landscape because I need to know what tools are these people using, right? Not just the people who are going to get the new CMS done and get it migrated, but the actual mortals, right? The interns, the writers, the copywriters, whoever they are, who actually have to use this stuff and turn it around and get it up there and get yelled at when they're late. I need to know what they have at their disposal that I can tap for them and what I'm not even going to talk about because I'm just setting them up for failure. Okay? Workshops, I'll talk about a little bit more about that, but basically, anytime you can get a client to work with you, eliciting requirements, eliciting goals, aligning content with business goals, because we don't want to pay to make content that doesn't return our investment, okay? That's a waste of time and money. That's why we have the library and novels, okay? We don't want to pay for that. So anytime you can do a workshop, that's great, because you can get that stuff firsthand. Okay, and what do we deliver? People always want to know, my project manager friend back there, what are you delivering? Okay, we can deliver a content assessment. We can deliver any sort of gap analysis. Wherever they want to be and wherever they are, when it comes to content, we can help figure that out, both qualitatively and quantitatively. We can map current state workflows. We can help come up with new workflows. And by workflow, I don't necessarily mean the super technological part. What I mean is the people, processes, and technologies that work together to get stuff out there, okay? And governance, I could do 2 hours on governance, but I won't. Governance is all about the rules, the regulations. People don't think of it in terms of content, and they shoot themselves in the foot. If you use your website as a place to dole out favors and keep people quiet, I know I'll give them half the homepage, and they'll get out of my face, okay? This is a problem. So we need to help people figure out who's making the decisions. If we can set that up ahead of time, and if we can document some parameters, what belongs on our intranet, what doesn't, okay? We're not gonna have, children's birthday pictures. We are gonna have bowling league results. That stuff actually matters in terms of the long-term sustainability. The ones with asterisks are the ones that are most often most interdisciplinary. You can have a developer, a designer, a UX person, or any number, a business analyst, right? Or strategist. Any of those people could be involved in that. Okay, so that's a lot of information. I want to jump into some real life examples because it's easy to talk about stuff. I tried to pick some just simple basic stuff that I could convey pretty quickly, but I'm sure as you turn your mind to the work that you do, you can probably think of and jam off this forever and maybe go home with some useful ideas. Okay, so recently I've been working with a global nonprofit. Okay, they wanted to focus on their website as opposed to a lot of their other stuff. And they wanted to streamline its transaction workflow. Okay, they wanted to make it easier for people to give money, to volunteer, to buy a calendar, to do any of these things. They also wanted it to be mobile friendly. Okay, they didn't necessarily want to really say what they meant by that or how much they were willing to pay. Somehow it has to be mobile friendly or what we now call responsive, right? Because mobile is often on your sofa if you're like me, all right? And they also had piles and piles and piles of specialized content that they were very proud of and was pretty well done. And they believe that this is going to make people do the actions more if the content is there. So we get called in to deal with this. Okay, so what happens? Remember, a lot of what I've described, you could kind of say crosses with UX, right? So how do we divide this up? Here's how we did it. First, we all started with the same common documentation that we got from the client that we had helped with a couple of years ago, okay? Personae, user journeys, documented business goals and requirements, some analytics, some heat maps, some percentages. We had one stakeholder workshop, and we got a lot of download from their branding and marketing. Not firsthand, but just sort of they're giving you stuff like, we use this sometimes. Here's some flyers. A lot of what a content strategist does is sit there and literally go through piles and piles of collateral to look for redundant, outdated, and trivial copy. The rot that is killing us. Okay? So, while the UX team went to work understanding the transactional flow, right? They went in there, there's a whole donation flow, there's a volunteer flow, there's a find your local chapter flow. They went in there to find that stuff and start thinking through what's the functionality, what's working, what's not, where are the extra steps, etc. How can we make this more engaging as well as more streamlined? I went to work in the current website to understand what's there and what's going on now, because I can't figure out where to bring them if I don't know what all this stuff is doing. Okay. I did a content assessment, sometimes also called a content audit. If anyone proposes this to you, just sit down and make sure you're on the same page, because these terms are still a little waffly in terms of what you mean, what I mean, what we all mean. Okay? The thing I want you to notice here is sometimes, believe it or not, people think about content strategy as like, you're going to tell me if the writing's any good. Okay? And I am. Right? I'm going to pull out my Steve Krug and I'm going to make sure that there's bullets where there's supposed to be bullets and all that stuff. But I'm also really going to find out things like, what are the elements of content on the page? Carousels, bullet lists, data visualizations, photographs that are blurry and off-brand, videos that may or may not be compelling. By having what the customer cares about and understanding what the user might need, I'm going to assess against those two things, right? And I'm going to make a giant spreadsheet. I only did about 60 pages on this. You can do a quick hit assessment between 50 and 100 pages of most artifacts. You're not going to find out the same thing as going through every page, which many will tell you you should do if it's less than about 5,000 pages. You really should. So think about that. It gets very intense. Okay, so you can see that these issues are really leading me toward thinking about strengths, weaknesses, purpose, and functionality as much as anything else, right? Does this page do the work it should do? Because if it doesn't, throw it out. You're paying someone to make it, maintain it, code it, update the images. Why? It's costing you money. Okay, and what you get when you do an audit like that is you get actionable information. This I ripped right out of a presentation that I did a couple weeks ago, right? Too much content on the site. The content tries to be all things, all people on every page. Poor segmentation, right? Poor weird user journeys. Like, who is this person that needs to find out all these things at once, right? Poor use of screen space. Terrible right rail abuse. Okay, formats, layouts, navigation structures, obscure rather than support action, right? So I don't even have to go into detail. I leave that for the design and the UX. I can just say, look, you're telling me what you want to do. I can't read this, okay? Longer than necessary paths to action, like 16 clicks to donate is not helpful to me. How can we condense this? Okay, so I recommended actually pretty high-level stuff, right? Like, you guys need some governance, you need some strategy. Every piece of content you need in every channel you have should have a discernible purpose that you can articulate. If it doesn't, throw it out. Realistic goals. These people sort of felt like they could win over the world, make $1 million, and create an army of volunteers on every page through their website. That is highly unlikely. Okay, it's time to get your C-level people in a room to talk this through and come up with some realistic expectations. And then we needed them to work with UX and design and create one that's going to support something that gets these more realistic goals aligned with content and out. Okay, there's lots more we could do together during discovery. Just blow through this because I'm almost out of time. Workshops. Anytime you can get a workshop together with the client or just with your project team interdisciplinarily, you're in luck. All right. You can, for example, work with clients to come up with the criteria which you will use for an audit so that when you come back and tell them that their content isn't working, they themselves, with their peers, reached consensus about what you were looking for. So they can't complain when you say it doesn't work. Okay, you can pull out current state roles and responsibilities, either for the teams, I see a smile, someone recognizes that. Okay, for the teams, for the channels, who's doing what where, what content is gonna do what where, any of that. Get it in a room, pull it out. You can tease out workflows. This is a really pretty one, but usually what management will tell you the workflow is and what the workers would tell you the workflow is are very different. And guess what? You're designing for the people that have to do the work, right? So you come up with some really great diagrams that you can then explore deeper and figure out how design and UX is going to simplify that. We go back to the office. You can pull us in, gang, for information architecture. Okay, and I know that field is shifting. I think we're going to hear about this soon. But regardless, stuff has to get categorized. Content strategists are usually content creators of some sort at one point, or they worked in publishing, or they worked in tech writing. So we're pretty good at figuring out how to structure info. And we've probably also done an assessment, so we know the site better than anyone, short of the client. Okay, so we're good at structuring stuff. Call us in for some wireframing, all right? This is like sort of a wireframe, right? But you can design it, and I'm thinking of the Google Glass here, just because you draw a picture and say it's gonna work like this, doesn't mean it's going to. Your content strategist comes in, they help actually ask you questions and write down what goes where and how much. This way you don't surprise your client, right? You can actually think about, okay, is this doable for the people? Technology can do anything, but is it doable for the people? Okay? And you can annotate that so when they sign off here, they've signed off. No funny surprises on launch day. Structured content is huge, right? We're doing responsive design now. We gotta think separate from the page, which means we gotta think in content modules and content chunks. So content strategists, often old journalists, therefore know how to do things like break down headings, subheadings, abstracts, know how they're going to go together and come apart. And nowadays, could the first line always be tweetable? Wouldn't that be great? Okay, then you've killed two birds with one stone. So we can go in there and help with that, and then with the assistance of design, visualize it in a way our clients can understand to tell us whether they can actually do it or not. And I'm going to end with page templates. This is a really crude page template on purpose. I did this with text boxes, right? What I'm doing here is something more complicated than a wireframe, but what it pretty much does is call out all the important things. I did this one because the CMS wasn't going to be built for another 2 months, and these people really needed to start migrating and editing content, okay? So we went right back to our old word processing, and we figured out, we made templates for the different levels. This was for a large hospital, okay? We gave it a page ID, we tell them to title it, we tell them to assign templates, what are the keywords, what's the meta description, gonna have to work with other people on the team. We're gonna have instructions to writers. That's an extra step that a strategist can help you with, right? So that my client can look at this, Developers and everyone else can look at the whole page, decide if everyone's cool with it, and if they are, we can hand this right off to the writers, who will now all, we hope, produce more coherent content, even though there's 50 of them. Okay, so to end off, what you get when you bring a strategist in is you get a more holistic strategy and a more holistic project that we hope is going to develop something usable. So holistic discovery is really where it starts, and there you go.